The Federation's collapse was no surprise to Darius Grange. He had seen the signs long before the final blow. Corruption, betrayal, and the unchecked greed of its ruling factions had slowly eaten away at the foundation of what had once been a beacon of unity in the galaxy. Now that same Federation lay in ruins, its territories fractured, its fleets scattered, and its once proud capital in ashes. But Darius wasn't concerned with the politics of alien empires. His only focus was survival. Stranded on the barren world of Haze 7, Darius fought the cold and isolation. His mission, a covert strike against a separatist faction loyal to the alien warlord Corps, had gone horribly wrong. He had watched his entire squad fall to an ambush of superior alien forces, leaving him as the last human standing in a hostile foreign world. His survival was a fluke, a mix of sheer luck and the training drilled into him since he was a child. For Darius, there was no room for fear, only action. For days, he navigated through alien landscapes, the remnants of a war-torn world that seemed to mock him. The Federation had once promised peace through strength, but now there was nothing but the silence of abandoned cities and the ruins of once mighty fortifications. It was here, in the forgotten dark of a once thriving human colony, that he found it. The structure was buried beneath miles of collapsed earth, an ancient facility buried by time and the negligence of his superiors. Yet, as Darius pried through the wreckage with his bare hands, a low hum filled the air, guiding him forward. Deep inside, the flickering lights of long-dead technology sparked to life, and a holographic interface flickered before him, revealing a vault. Inside that vault, Darius uncovered a relic, a black crystal pulsing with an eerie light. At first, he thought it was just another artifact, something left behind by the humans who had once called this place home. But as he reached for it, a surge of energy rippled through his body. His muscles tensed, his vision blurred with flashes of forgotten history, and a voice echoed in his mind, ancient, commanding, and undeniably human. "You are the last of your line," the voice intoned. The heir to a bloodline forged in the fires of war. Darius staggered back, his heart racing. What did this mean? He was no leader, no great heir, just a soldier, a survivor. Yet, as his fingers brushed the surface of the black crystal once more, the visions grew stronger. He saw fleeting images of a great warrior, an ancestor, draped in armor as black as the stars themselves, leading humanity to dominance across the galaxy. This was no mere relic. This was a weapon, and more than that, a key to humanity's lost legacy. The shock was overwhelming, yet something inside him stirred, a primal hunger. Humanity had been betrayed. Humanity had been broken. But perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to rise again, to take what was owed. With no other choice but to adapt or perish, Darius made his decision. He would rally the surviving humans in the system, those scattered and fractured remnants of the Federation. They would have no choice but to follow him, whether they wanted to or not. But as Darius held the crystal in his hands, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and newfound power, he couldn't help but wonder, what price would he pay for what was to come? Darius sat alone in the dimly lit chamber, the black crystal resting in his hands. The glowing edges flickered like the pulse of a dying star. He could feel its power thrumming beneath his skin, a rhythm that matched the frantic beating of his heart. Each pulse was a call, a beckoning, and it grew stronger with every moment he held it. The crystal was alive, alive in ways that defied understanding. But its call was clear. This was his inheritance, his destiny, his curse. As the days passed, the connection between Darius and the relic deepened. At first, it was subtle, his senses heightened, his reflexes sharpened, his mind becoming faster, more alert. He had always been a soldier, trained to survive under impossible conditions, but now he was becoming something more. The darkness inside the crystal fed him, guiding his every move with cold precision. Aware that it was no coincidence that he had found it, Darius allowed himself to give in. just enough to learn its secrets. But with each passing day, the whispers became harder to ignore. The voices in his head, deep and ancient, spoke to him in riddles. They called to him by name, telling him that humanity's future lay in his hands. His bloodline was destined to rule, to conquer, to bring order to a fractured galaxy, and all that would take was his willingness to embrace the full power of the crystal. He hadn't yet fully understood the depths of the power he was tapping into. The visions were intense, flashes of his ancestor, the warrior who had led humanity to the brink of galactic domination. He saw himself in those moments, standing beside the same mighty legions, his voice commanding fear and respect. It was intoxicating. Every memory, every strategy, every victorious battle became a part of him, flowing through his veins like fire. Yet with the power came the hunger, the unrelenting desire to expand, to conquer. It wasn't enough to simply survive anymore. Darius wanted more. By the time he left the ruins of HFY, leading a small band of survivors who had rallied to his banner, he had changed. The power from the crystal was already making itself known. His once feeble followers now believed in him, almost blindly. His tactics were flawless, his decisions swift and ruthless. Each victory came with a growing sense of control, of dominance. But with every success, the voice of the crystal grew louder. It wasn't satisfied with mere victories. It whispered of a galaxy to be bent to his will, of an empire to be forged from the ashes of the Federation. And Darius, caught between his humanity and the alien force coursing through him, was ready to listen. But there were those who would try to stop him. It wasn't long before the first of the alien warlords began to take notice. Kor, the ruthless leader of a savage species, saw the rise of humanity's mysterious new commander as a threat. Darius had no intention of bowing to an alien warlord, and the first battle he led against Kor's forces was a bloodbath. His forces, though small, were laser-focused, driven by Darius's unrelenting strategy and his uncanny ability to read the battlefield. It wasn't just tactics, it was instinct, a cold, calculated understanding of the chaos around him. Victory was swift, brutal, and decisive. The survivors of the alien army scattered, leaving the field open for Darius to claim his first major prize, an ancient alien warship, a relic from a lost era. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to start his war. As he stood amidst the wreckage of the battle, gazing at the blood-soaked battlefield, Darius knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. He wasn't just fighting for humanity's survival anymore. He was fighting for its future, a future where humanity stood at the top, unchallenged. And as the crystal pulsed in his hand, he felt its hunger grow, demanding more, pushing him further down a path from which there was no return. Darius stood at the helm of the captured warship, staring out into the void of space. The view was breathtaking, sweeping galaxies, endless stars. But his focus was on something far more immediate, the task ahead. He had won his first victory, but now came the real challenge, gathering the scattered remnants of humanity. The Federation was in ruins, and without a leader, the few surviving colonies were in disarray. These humans weren't soldiers. They were survivors, broken, beaten, and lost. They didn't know how to fight anymore. But Darius did, and he was about to show them. He sent a message to every surviving human enclave, using the warship's communication system to broadcast his call. At first, the message was met with skepticism, distrust, and even hostility. Who was this man, some unknown soldier claiming the mantle of leadership? Who was he to unite humanity when it had been torn apart by betrayal and war? But Darius's vision was too powerful to ignore. His message was simple: humanity will rise again. Under my command, we will reclaim what we've lost and build something greater. His voice, calm yet filled with an undeniable force, cut through the static and doubt, reaching deep into the hearts of those who had heard nothing but the whispers of failure for so long. It wasn't long before the first survivors rallied to him, desperate people, afraid to believe yet unwilling to let go of hope. The first wave of refugees and ex-soldiers arrived at his fleet, bringing with them the tools to rebuild, the experience of war, and the embers of a broken nation. Darius welcomed them with open arms, but he was no fool. He knew that they needed more than just a leader. They needed unity. And unity meant breaking the chains of division, overcoming centuries of distrust among the fractured human factions. He made an example of the strongest and most influential of the human warlords, leaders who had previously sworn allegiance to the Federation, but had turned their backs on humanity's ideals when the Federation fell. With ruthless precision, Darius eliminated the threats, securing his command through force and cunning. He would not allow rivals to weaken the human cause. There was no room for compromise. In his mind, weakness had been humanity's downfall. The old ways of diplomacy and negotiation had led to nothing but betrayal. But despite his brutality, his message began to resonate. Darius gave the survivors something they hadn't had in years: purpose. The scattered enclaves began to unite under his banner, bringing their fleets and forces with them. It wasn't just a rebellion anymore. It was the beginning of an empire. As the ranks swelled, so did Darius's power. He was no longer just a soldier with a dream. He was becoming a symbol, a dark hero who would lead humanity to its rightful place in the galaxy. However, as his army grew, so did the cracks in his leadership. His closest allies began to notice the changes in him, the coldness in his decisions, the growing distance in his eyes. They had seen the brutal executions, the dismissive attitude toward their concerns, but none dared speak out yet. Fear and loyalty, a deadly combination, kept dissent at bay. Darius had become a ruler in the truest sense of the word. His forces, now numbering in the tens of thousands, were a well-oiled machine. His followers were fanatical, not because of his charisma, but because of his unwavering certainty. Under his command, humanity was becoming something more, but it was also becoming something darker. As the fleet moved toward its next target, a well-defended planet rich in resources, Darius's mind was already calculating his next steps. The galaxy was still fractured, but the pieces were falling into place. He knew that Kor, the alien warlord who had already tasted the bitter edge of his wrath, wouldn't be the last to stand against him. Darius's path was clear. To reclaim humanity's place in the galaxy, he would have to crush all those who stood in his way, no matter the cost. And as his warship tore through the void, leading his growing fleet toward their next conquest, Darius felt the crystal in his hand hum with power, urging him forward. There was no turning back now. Humanity's destiny was in motion. Darius had become an unstoppable force, but in the shadows of his growing empire, doubt was beginning to stir. His closest lieutenant, Alina Rook, had always believed in him. She had fought beside him from the very beginning, through the brutal battles on distant planets, through the blood and carnage that had followed in their wake. She had trusted him with her life, and in return, he had given her power, respect, and the promise of a restored humanity. But now she was beginning to see the cracks in the man she had once admired. Alina had spent months studying the black crystal, watching how it transformed Darius. His obsession with its power had grown, and the more he wielded it, the more ruthless he became. His decisions were no longer guided by a sense of justice or morality, but by the cold logic of domination. He was starting to resemble the very warlords he had once despised, the very ones who had driven humanity to the brink of extinction. One night, after another brutal campaign had ended in victory, Alina stood by Darius's side as he surveyed the destruction they had wrought. The landscape before them was a war-torn world, the ruins of an alien city smoldering in the distance. His face, illuminated by the glow of the crystal, was unreadable. He had become a man consumed, not by the desire to protect humanity, but by the thirst for ultimate power. "Darius," she said softly, her voice filled with hesitation, "this isn't what we fought for. This isn't what humanity needs. We're becoming just like them. Like the Federation, like the aliens we're fighting. We're starting to lose ourselves." He turned toward her, his eyes narrowing. "And what do you suggest, Alina?" "That we turn back. That we let the galaxy remain in chaos, fractured and divided. Humanity has no future unless we take it." His voice was cold, but there was something deeper, something darker in his gaze. "You're too naive to understand. This power, this gift from our bloodline, it's the only way forward." But Alina wasn't so easily swayed. She had seen too much. The unnecessary brutality, the endless bloodshed, the way Darius's once clear purpose had become clouded by ambition. The crystal had changed him, and she feared that it was consuming him from the inside. But there was no denying the truth. Darius was the only one capable of leading humanity. Yet, even in her doubts, Alina knew that she couldn't let him continue down this path. She had to do something, even if it meant betraying him. That night, she made a decision. Alina had known about the Black Throne, the ancient seat of power that had been passed down through the generations of Darius's bloodline. She had learned its dark secret. The throne was not just a symbol of power, it was a conduit to something far more dangerous. The crystal had been created to lure its wielder into a state of complete submission. Only one thing mattered: absolute control. And whoever sat upon the throne would be forced to sacrifice their soul. Alina's heart raced as she secretly contacted the resistance, those few who had managed to evade Darius's growing empire. She provided them with the information that could bring him down. The Black Throne was the key to Darius's ultimate downfall, but it was also the key to destroying everything he had built. The message was clear: stop Darius before it was too late, before he became a god of destruction. But even as she sent the coordinates to the resistance, Alina's gut twisted with guilt. She had betrayed the man she had once called a friend, a leader. But there was no going back now. The galaxy was on the brink, and Darius was no longer the hero he once was. As the days passed, Alina's fears deepened. Darius sensed something had changed. His intuition, honed by the crystal, told him that Alina had been hiding something, and he would stop at nothing to find out what. Alina's betrayal did not go unnoticed. Darius, with his heightened senses and the growing influence of the black crystal, had already begun to feel the shift. The subtle tension, the shift in Alina's demeanor, the way her gaze avoided his when he passed. He knew something was wrong, but he hadn't yet connected the dots. Not fully. It was a moment of weakness that revealed everything. In the midst of preparing for a new campaign, Darius had been poring over military reports when a small datapad arrived, bearing an encrypted message. It was from a resistance cell, scattered across the fringes of his growing empire. The message, encrypted so carefully, spoke of plans to undermine him. It revealed that the Black Throne, his destiny, was not a gift, but a trap, a mechanism designed to strip its wielder of their very humanity. And more chillingly, it suggested that Alina Rook, his closest ally, had been the one to send it. The realization hit him like a hammer. Alina, who had once been his confidant, his second in command, had turned against him. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. Darius did not wait. He called for a private meeting, a direct confrontation, knowing that Alina's betrayal would not be easily explained away. The black crystal whispered to him, urging him to act quickly, to claim control. But in that moment, Darius hesitated. For the first time in a long time, his grip on the darkness faltered. Was Alina truly the traitor they claimed? Was it possible she was trying to save him? When Alina entered his private quarters, Darius did not speak at once. His gaze was intense, his mind racing. The room felt colder than usual, the weight of her silence hanging between them. "You've been hiding something from me," Darius said finally, his voice quiet but dangerous. "I know you've been in contact with the resistance." The message came through. Alina's eyes narrowed, but she didn't flinch. She had known this moment would come, had prepared for it, even as the guilt ate at her from the inside. "Darius," she said softly, her voice trembling just enough to show her conflict, "I never wanted to betray you, but I can't stand by and watch you destroy everything you've built. The Black Throne, It's not what you think. It's consuming you. The power, the darkness, it's turning you into something else, something you won't be able to control. Darius's eyes glowed faintly, the power of the crystal resonating in his very being. "You're wrong," he hissed. "This is my destiny. We can't return to the old ways. The galaxy is broken, Elena. I'm the only one who can fix it. The throne, the crystal, they're mine. They belong to my bloodline." The words stung Elena like daggers. She had always known that Darius's belief in his destiny would become his downfall, but hearing him speak it with such conviction now made her heart ache. She had seen the change in him, had watched as the man she once knew became a figure of fear and domination. "Your bloodline is cursed, Darius," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was a mistake, a weapon meant for destruction, not salvation. I couldn't stand by and let you become this. I tried to stop you. I failed." There was a long, painful silence, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. "You think you can stop me?" Darius's voice was icy now, devoid of any warmth. The crystal's pull was undeniable, and its whispers had become commands. "You think you can just walk away from this?" Before Elena could respond, Darius raised his hand, his fingers crackling with energy, pulling the darkness into him like a storm. The power of the crystal surged, and she felt it, the crushing weight of his will. But even as he prepared to crush her beneath his might, a part of him hesitated. She had been his closest ally. He had trusted her. The doubt gnawed at him, but the crystal screamed louder, urging him to act. And then Elena did something unexpected. She stepped forward, not away. She didn't flinch, didn't shrink back. She stood tall, meeting his gaze with unwavering defiance. "You don't have to do this, Darius," she said, her voice steady now, full of resolve. "You're still human. The man I fought beside is still in there. I know it." For a brief moment, Darius felt the weight of her words, felt the struggle within himself. But then the darkness surged, and with it, a chilling clarity. He wasn't the man he once was. He was the darkness incarnate now. "Get out of my way," he growled, the power of the black crystal crackling like thunder. The moment was over in an instant. Darius struck first, unleashing a wave of energy that sent Elena sprawling across the floor, her body racked with pain. "Goodbye, Elena," he whispered, but his words were hollow. They meant nothing. She lay there, struggling to breathe, but even as darkness closed in on her vision, one thought consumed her mind. It was never supposed to end this way. The moment Elena fell, her body crumpling to the ground, Darius felt nothing. No regret, no remorse. The crystal's power surged through him, blotting out any lingering sense of humanity. He had crushed his closest ally, and the act left him cold, empty, and yet exhilarated. The resistance, the betrayers, the weakness, they had all been dealt with. He was now unchallenged, standing at the pinnacle of power. But the victory tasted bitter. As Elena's lifeless body lay at his feet, a flicker of doubt crept into his mind, too faint to grasp fully but undeniable nonetheless. He turned away from her, his mind already racing forward to the next campaign, to the next conquest, to the next world that would kneel before him. The galaxy would be his, and nothing, not even the brief pangs of hesitation, would stand in his way. Yet, in the quiet moments after, when he was alone in his command chamber, the silence felt oppressive. The crystal pulsed with its familiar rhythm, but now it felt alien. It was not a soothing beat, as it had been in the past, but a sharp, demanding thrum, like an echo of something lost. The power was his, yes, but at what cost? The doubts clawed at him, even as the crystal pressed him forward. He could no longer remember why he had started this journey. The images of his ancestor, the ancient warrior who had wielded the Black Throne with such ruthless resolve, flashed before his eyes. But those memories, once a source of pride, now felt like a shackle. He had inherited the throne, the power, the bloodline, but it had never come with a manual. There was no guide for how to rule when the very foundation of his being was built on destruction. And then there was the dream that had haunted him in the quietest moments of his nights, a dream of the Black Throne, its dark silhouette looming over him, the echoes of voices from the past, his ancestors, the first to fall to the power of the crystal, whispered warnings in his ears, but they were always too faint, too distant. He couldn't make sense of them. Darius shook his head. He was losing his edge. He snapped back to the present, pulling himself out of the spiral of doubt. He had work to do. The Empire was growing, his fleet expanding, and the time to strike was now. His next target was a heavily fortified system, home to one of the last remaining factions of the Federation. It would be a battle unlike any other, but it would solidify his reign once and for all. He sent orders to his generals, and the fleet began its preparations. As the command bridge hummed with activity, Darius stood still, his mind racing. His victory over Elena had been a necessity, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. He had won, but at what price? The galaxy trembled under his power, and his forces continued to multiply. Yet, as he prepared for his final push, the nagging feeling grew. He knew his next move would be decisive. The question was whether the galaxy would bend to his will, or if his own ambition would be his undoing. On the eve of his next conquest, Darius stood alone in his private quarters, gazing at the dark sky outside. The stars seemed to shimmer in the distance, a silent reminder of what he had already lost. His reflection in the glass seemed distant, a shadow of the man he had been. He had destroyed everything that had once mattered, and now he was left with nothing but power. Was this all there was? The Black Throne, the crystal, the Empire, none of it had brought him peace, only the ever-present hunger, gnawing at him, demanding more. A final command echoed through his mind, one that seemed to come from deep within the crystal. Claim everything. The galaxy would bend, or it would break beneath his will. The battlefield was set, and Darius stood at the helm of his fleet, staring down at the fortified Federation world below. This was it, the final blow to the remnants of humanity's old order. The planet was surrounded by a wall of defenses that would take hours to breach, but for Darius, there was no question. His forces were vast, his strategies perfect, and with the black crystal amplifying his every move, victory was assured. He could feel the crystal vibrating within him, urging him to strike, to conquer, to claim the throne. The Federation remnants had put up a fight. Their forces had gathered here, in the heart of their territory, to make their last stand. But Darius could sense their desperation. They were on the verge of collapse, their leadership fractured, their morale broken. They had no chance against his might. And yet, as the fleet surged forward, Darius's mind drifted back to the faces of the men and women who had followed him from the beginning. His first followers, those soldiers who had believed in the cause. Many had died in battle, and many more would soon follow, but he had never stopped to mourn them. They were just pawns in a larger game, weren't they? The thought made him pause for a moment, but only for a brief instant. He had a war to win, and nothing, not even the ghost of his past, could stand in his way. As his ships descended toward the planet's surface, the first wave of bombardment began. The sky above the planet turned black with the fire of weaponry, an inferno that could be seen from every corner of the world. The Federation's defenses were no match for the power of Darius's fleet. He watched impassively as cities were reduced to rubble, as entire swaths of the planet were scorched clean. Yet, something inside him shifted. There was no satisfaction in the destruction. The familiar rush of power felt hollow. For the first time in years, he questioned the price of this victory. "Sir, the ground forces are reporting minimal resistance," one of his commanders called, his voice crackling over the comm. "The planetary shields are weakening." Darius nodded, his mind already focused on the next phase of the attack. The Federation's leaders would soon be cornered, their last stronghold about to fall. The crystal pulsed within him, urging him forward, urging him to wipe out every last trace of resistance. He could feel the power of the throne calling to him, the whispers becoming louder, more insistent. His bloodline had always been destined to rule, to dominate. It was not just his right. It was his birthright. The galaxy was his to shape, and nothing, not even a dying remnant of humanity, would stop him. But then, a flash of movement on the planet's surface caught his attention, a signal from a Federation flagship. The message was brief, yet it carried an undeniable weight. It was an offer of surrender, but not in the way he expected. "We yield," the message said, transmitted directly to Darius's ship. "But not to you. You have claimed the galaxy, Darius, but in doing so, you have lost humanity itself. We do not bow to the darkness you have embraced. Humanity will fight one last time, not as an empire, but as a collective. We will unite the broken remnants, and you will be our enemy." For a brief, heart-stopping moment, Darius felt something he hadn't in years: uncertainty. The message was not just a plea, it was a challenge, a statement of defiance. The resistance was not just a handful of rebels anymore. They had rallied, had gathered together in a final bid for survival. Humanity, though fractured, was still capable of standing up. It was a test, one that Darius had never expected. It wasn't just a war for power anymore. It was a war for the soul of humanity itself. As his fleet continued its descent, Darius's grip tightened around the crystal. He had already made his decision. The galaxy would bend to him or burn. But as the crystal thrummed, echoing the voices of his ancestors, something deep inside him, a spark, a shadow of the man he once was, whispered one final warning. "What have you become, Darius?" The answer was lost in the void, drowned out by the growing storm of battle. The final battle was upon them. Darius stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring out at the chaotic battlefield unfolding below. His forces, vast and powerful, continued their assault on the Federation's last stronghold, but this time, something was different. The resistance was stronger than he'd anticipated. The remnants of humanity, broken and scattered, had found common ground. The Federation's leaders had rallied every last fighter, every remaining fleet, in a desperate bid to stop him. The storm of energy weapons and warships colliding in the sky above was a maelstrom of destruction. But Darius wasn't focused on the battle. He was focused on the Black Throne, the seat of his power. The crystal pulsed within him, the weight of his destiny now more palpable than ever. He could feel its hunger, its cold insistence that he crush all who stood in his way. But despite the power coursing through him, the weight of what he had become began to suffocate him. Through the chaos, Alina's words echoed in his mind, the one she had spoken before he cast her aside. "You're losing yourself, Darius. This power is not meant for you." The guilt, no, the shame, seemed to gnaw at him now. The man who had once dreamed of leading humanity to greatness had long since been eclipsed by the monster he had become. The faces of those he had betrayed, those he had destroyed, flashed before him. His empire, his ambition, had cost him everything: his friends, his allies, his very humanity. He gripped the armrest of his throne, the cold metal biting into his palms as the crystal hummed with dark power. His vision blurred, and for a fleeting moment, he saw his reflection in the glass, eyes glowing with unnatural light, a shadow of a man lost to the darkness. A deep voice crackled through the communication system. It was a voice he hadn't heard in years. General Kale, one of his earliest supporters. "Sir." Kal's voice was strained. "We've encountered an unexpected force. Federation reinforcements. They've brought out the last of their advanced weapons. The resistance is stronger than we thought." Darius's hand tightened into a fist. His fleet had the advantage, but the Federation's last stand was proving far more formidable than anticipated. The resistance wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something more, something Darius had long since lost: their souls, their hope, and the last remnants of their humanity. His breath quickened as the crystal thrummed again, urging him to unleash his power. to bend the galaxy to his will. But this time, Darius hesitated. He thought of Elena again, of her sacrifice, of the lives he had destroyed in his unrelenting pursuit of power. Could he really continue this? Was this who he was destined to be? As the Federation forces pressed forward, Darius made a choice. The crystal, sensing his shift in will, screamed in fury, its energy surging within him, demanding control. But Darius pushed back, not with force, but with clarity. He stood from the throne, the weight of it suddenly unbearable, and turned away. It was time to end the war, not with a victory, but with the end of his reign. "Order a ceasefire," Darius commanded, his voice cold but resolute. "Tell the fleet to stand down." The room fell silent. His generals exchanged uncertain glances, but the black crystal, sensing the shift in Darius's intentions, began to crack, its energy destabilizing, its dark influence slipping away. "I am not the emperor they made me to be," Darius muttered under his breath, his eyes fixed on the battlefield outside. "I am just a man, and I have failed humanity." In that moment, the crystal shattered, a burst of dark energy blasting outward as its power dissipated into the void. The war ended. The galaxy had been irrevocably changed, but in the aftermath of Darius's surrender, humanity was given a chance to rebuild. The Black Throne was no longer a symbol of domination, but a shattered relic of a man who had once believed in a future that was not his to dictate. As the fleet withdrew, leaving behind the remnants of a broken empire, Darius disappeared into the shadows of history. Some would say he died on that battlefield, consumed by his own darkness. Others would say he was the last of humanity's great heroes, who had redeemed himself too late to save what was left. But in the end, it didn't matter. The galaxy was still alive, and humanity, though scarred, still had a chance to rise again.